Podcast people, I want to welcome you to a very special podcast event with me and the indomitable Manny Arango.
I made it.
My spiritual son in the ministry, in the world. We are on. We are
here.
We're speaking forth into the podcast atmosphere. Ready to drop some knowledge.
You're gonna drop knowledge
on the podcast world,
I'm gonna agree.
It's gonna be a good. It's gonna be
great.
It's gonna be
dope. Good stuff. I feel like I've made it.
Yeah, right.
I made it.
Exactly.
You know
Somehow you made it.
What do I need to do after this?
Listen, exactly. The fact that we're here, and so what we're gonna talk about today, son.
Yep.
Is I want to take just a little bit of time to talk about fatherhood, kind of from two major perspectives.
Okay, cool.
I think number one, when we say the word fatherhood, I think people's butt cheeks can almost tighten up a little bit when we say father or fatherhood, because I feel like the role of the father in 21st American culture, and we can think of it as, at this point, it's not even necessarily African American culture, it's just American culture.
Totally, you're right.
Right now, the role of the father in the culture is very questionable.
Yeah.
I think that, we're living in a time in which we've become very sensitive to the rights of femininity and women's rights.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's important.
Yeah.
Because in a way, you could make an argument that women are the original slaves. Women are the original N-word. They're the original. They really are. That a lot of what black people had to march for, women had to march for. Women had to march for the right to vote. Women are still battling equal pay for equal work. To this day, there are women who are enslaved right now.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about sex slaves or whatever. There are women who are in slavery right now. There is abuse against women, violence against women. And so I don't know how I kind of got off on that. My point.
I don't know.
My point is that I think that what happens in our world is that we have a tendency to not necessarily look for the balance, but to kind of jump on the whole or the side of it.
Yeah.
There was a time when kind of masculine culture and humanity was led by men, and we had patriarchal societies, and kind of men have done a lot of good, but they've done a lot of damage, and particularly damage to women and damage to people that don't look like them or believe like them or agree like they agree. And so in our current society now, we've become much more sensitive to female perspective, sensitive about femininity, sensitive about sensitivity, sensitive about the rights of women. And I think that's a good thing for our culture, for our world. At the same time, I think that it kind of throws into question, okay, if I'm a guy, if I'm a man, what exactly is my role in the family at this point? What do I bring to the table? And I think that the effect of divorce on the culture and just where we are as a society today, when we say father, so for example, last night in our Wednesday night service, we dedicate babies, and I almost hesitate to kind of lay out there that a leading factor in the success of an individual is whether or not their father was there.
Yeah.
So and it's the statistics bear it out. If we're looking at did you graduate from high school, one of the leading categories of whether or not that was true or not was whether your dad was there.
Yeah.
Teenage pregnancy, was your dad there? Graduate from college, was your dad there? Men who are in prison, incarcerated, was their dad there? Absentee fathers is a leading factor in some of the most negative categories that we see in our world. And so we find ourselves in this weird place in which we want to address it. At the same time, we don't want to make it seem like, if you have no father, you have no hope. Because there are so many young people being raised without their fathers in their lives. And of course, we want to offer God as their father, but we can't ignore the fact that your physical father or a physical father in your life is a factor.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I wanted us to talk about it today from a couple different perspectives. Number one, You're the youth pastor at my church, one of the best youth pastors I know, and so you're ministering to a generation. Quite a few of them are without fathers, fatherless today. You really kind of grew up with your dad, but kind of not with your dad, and so
Very sometimey.
So certainly you can talk about it from that perspective. I'm someone who grew up with my father. My father was in my life. And so I wanted us to talk about it from that perspective.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to talk about it a little bit from the spiritual father relationship. After service last night, I went out with some of my spiritual sons, guys that I'm pastoring, guys that I'm trying to teach how to be effective in the ministry.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about it from that perspective a little bit as well. But I just wanted to kind of start off by kind of talking about, even kind of what I ministered on last night, how I ministered on it, kind of talking about how to choose people, and if anyone wants to see that, they can always, I'm sure we can, they can go and listen to the message, go to the online, WOCConline.org, and kind of look at the archive of that message in which we
Worldovercomers.church.
Okay, worldovercomers.church, sure. And they can kind of find out, we talked about how to choose people, choose people to be intimate.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm communicating a topic like that I know that can be kind of sticky, I'm kind of torn between, do I want to communicate this with a certain amount of feminine sensitivity that is required within our culture?
Yeah.
Or am I just going to be a man and just say it the way a man would say it, or say it the way a father would say it?
Yeah.
And so I just wanted us to kind of have a conversation a little bit about that, and just to talk about kind of from your perspective, the role of fathers today, and just kind of how the world is being shaped right now.
Totally.
When it comes to dads.
Yeah, obviously the role of fathers cannot be overestimated.
Sure.
You gave all the statistics, and it's so true. I think even when you look at boys on a football team, or the boys that are at our youth group, I think the number one thing is that they've been mothered. And so there's a certain amount of coddling, and there's a different way that men show love versus the way that moms show love.
Yeah.
I pretty much think that my mother loves me unconditionally.
Sure.
And the time that I did spend with my dad, that just wasn't the case. It was he loved me unconditionally, but there were some conditions that I was just gonna have to meet if I was gonna live in his house. I remember the first time my older brother came home with his ears pierced, and my dad physically ripped them out of his ears. Right. And it communicated, you're not gonna live here. Right. And have your ears pierced. I remember my dad, he'd wake up early in the morning. He was a construction worker, still is, does carpentry. And he would wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. He would be out the house by 7:30. His rule was, no men are allowed to be in my house while I'm not here.
Right.
And so
Right.
I'm obviously going to school, so I'm
Right.
leaving the house.
Right.
My brother, if he did not have a job, he still had to leave the house.
Right.
He was not allowed. He was like, you're not gonna stay in my house and watch TV while I'm at work.
Yeah.
You're gonna go somewhere and do something productive. So, my dad was in and out of the home, but still, my dad had these are the requirements for being here and living with me. I think one of the challenges comes in, and I think I can say this in this way, that sometimes with young guys that haven't had dads, they can't tell the difference between information or critique that is hurtful and information that is harmful. So
Sure.
I say it that way to communicate that there are some things that you've said to me that hurt me, but they were actually said to help me. They weren't said to harm me. And I think sometimes when young guys hear a dad's critique, automatically their pride rises up, because you're part of what happens when you're 16 and 17 is you start feeling like I'm a man, you know what I mean? And so I want to be approved of. I don't necessarily want you to critique me. And so I've even had to learn how to give that approval verbally and then offer critique.
Sure.
But that critique can sometimes be seen as harmful, whereas really it's not harmful. Me going to the dentist is hurtful. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. But at the same time, me going to the dentist is helping to heal something that was actually harmful, and the thing that probably harmed me tasted great.
Right.
We have an issue with, man, that was hurtful, and that doesn't mean that it was harmful.
Yeah.
And sometimes dads say things that are hurtful.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, and I think the role of a dad, especially with me and your relationship, and me and my natural dad, is that my dad said things that cut me, but he was trying to sculpt me.
Yeah.
And that's different. It's different than just cutting someone just to cut them. And even when I look at the Hillside football team and their relationship, not just with me, but with their coaches, it's almost like they can get such an attitude with their coaches, and this coach is just trying to help you, bro. Like,
Yeah.
But the fact that you've never had a man tell you, be quiet.
Yeah.
You be quiet. I remember when I first moved down here, you told me to be quiet, and I was like, oh shoot, okay. Like,
Right.
and I had to realize that may not have been what I've experienced, but that doesn't mean that it's not right, and it doesn't mean that it's not normal.
Yeah.
And actually, I have to now expose myself to a new normal.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think that, and even as preachers or as communicators, you get to a point sometimes where I toss and turn quite a bit, like even with the concepts I shared last night. It's kind of like afterwards, it's like people just think that, you just said this like you don't care. But, I think that you definitely come up against kind of you find yourself torn between truth and comfort to some extent.
Yeah.
It's like, do I want to tell you the truth? Do I want to talk about a particular issue if I know that maybe 75% of the people that I'm talking to may fall into this category? Kind of a part of what I shared last night is something that I've shared in the podcast, because I actually talked on this podcast about clay versus crap.
Yeah.
And is this person crap or is this person clay? I'm having a conversation with one of the young guys I mentor on the ride in here, and he's just kind of like, last night I kind of left church kind of feeling like, I feel like I'm kind of 60-40. It was like, so there was like 3 of them where I felt like crap, and only 2 of them where I felt like clay. And he's like, no, but I need it, I'm saying to him, I don't know if you quite understand the turmoil that you go through as a communicator of, if I feel like I have something to say, what happens when what I'm saying is not necessarily popular? Or what happens if I'm addressing something that has become accepted within the culture, that I'm, in a sense, I'm almost criticizing culture because it's just something that we've kind of accepted. And I think that, the role as a communicator, but certainly the role as a father. I think that my dad definitely said things to me, and my fathers in the faith, not just my actual father, but my fathers in the faith, definitely were quicker to say something to me. I can only remember one time my mother saying something to me that really cut me to the quick and really impacted me. I mean, only once. Whereas there's just too many times. I can't, whether we're talking about my father or my fathers in the faith. There were just too many times in which my feelings just got, if there's too many scars, I've got pretty much one from my mother. But beyond that,
she may have felt bad about even saying
and
that.
she may have felt bad about it. And when I say this, she said it, she almost doesn't remember it. So I think that, certainly, and I think, even in our discussion, it's like, as we're sitting here talking, I can't help but think about all of the women who may be listening to this who are trying to raise a child on their own. And it's not their choice that the guy's not there. It's not their choice that the relationship didn't work out. They didn't say, oh, I want to be a single mother. They're finding themselves in that single mother role. And, I think that we have to find a way to address what's broken without making it seem like there's no hope for people that may not necessarily be in the ideal situation.
I agree.
Because I think that right now, I'm having conversations with a lot of guys who I feel like were just raised by their mothers, and there's positive to that. Certainly they have a sensitive perspective when it comes to certain things, especially when it comes to women. But I think that there also could be something that's lacking.
Totally.
Because I was recently counseling a guy who just kind of said to me, well, his mother raised him to always make women happy. Just be about pleasing the woman. Just be about making that woman happy, you know, and that was the primary thing that was drilled into his head.
Yeah.
And although I do believe that making your woman happy, making your wife happy should be a factor in the relationship, but it's not the only factor.
Not at all.
And so if that's all, if you've only been taught the female side, you've only been taught the female perspective, because I think that your mom can teach you a lot about women.
Totally.
But I think that if that balance is not brought to bear, then something can be missing.
You're right. And so my mom, so for 3 years while I was in high school, my dad, I found out when I was 12 that my dad was addicted to drugs, and at some point in high school, my mom just got fed up and kind of kicked my dad out. And so my mom took me to church and was like, we're gonna find men here at the church who are going to help to mentor you. I mean, my mom was adamant, like, like, what's the point of me going to church if I can't have a village that's gonna help to not like raise my son, not take the place of his dad, but definitely start to tell him, I'm not going to talk to him about certain issues, And so youth leaders at church, and it was a guy at church that taught me how to budget money. That was not something that I learned at home. That was something that I learned because my mother was very, very intentional about supplementing my growth and development with male figures that she knew she could trust. And I mean, my mom was adamant. Like, when I was 12 and 13, my mom was like, look, you can pick him up whenever you want to pick him up. You need to check his grades. Like, and then the flip side of it is, there were dudes that a dude from church taught me how to drive. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So a dude from the step team taught me how to drive. So not only did my mom actually allow men to speak into my life, but then men stepped up and really became what my dad wasn't able to be. My youth pastor took me shopping for my prom suit. You know what I'm saying? Suit for prom, my tuxedo for prom. So I think if you are a single mom, there has to be an understanding of, you know what? Okay, these are where my limits lie, but that doesn't mean I'm doomed. Right. I can definitely find what this young man needs, because in church we become a family, and we can get some spiritual dads and some spiritual uncles and some spiritual older brothers to really begin to say, hey, dude, she doesn't talk to you right.
Right.
Why do you let your girl talk to you that way? Or what's going on now? Why'd you get so mad and actually start to check you and correct you? Because by the time I got 16, 17, I didn't really want to hear. Not only was my mom not saying critical things to me, but I didn't really want to hear critique from my mom. Like, that's not. I was way more open to hearing critique from someone that I felt like I could relate to. Like, you can relate to me. You know what it's like to obviously be in relationships with women, and you can give me a perspective that I don't have right now. Yeah,
and I think that I just want to be clear. I think that that's kind of why I wanted us to have this discussion around this particular topic, because I think that what we're always determined to do, and we've been trying to do it here at World Overcomers, and I'm trying to inspire the other guys that are connected to me through the fellowship, etc., to be about it, is to really inspire men, because I think that we can just kind of accept the situation and just say, well, it is what it is. This is how it is.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, we're not trying to make it seem like, oh, it's hopeless if your child's father's not in their life, his or her life.
It's not hopeless.
It's not hopeless. At the same time, we can't make it seem like it's just so okay that it allows men to not have to rise to the occasion.
You're right.
And I'm not talking about men and their own children. Certainly that's a part of it. But also the leaders in the church, the coaches in the community, the guys within the community that are saying, okay, all right, if you're a consistent guy in the community, then you need to be consistent for more than just your own children if you have them.
Yeah.
But you need to also say, okay, what role can I play in the culture around me? Because there's a lack that's happening when it comes to young people. I think that a significant, for me, a big part of my perspective, it really always is about balance. And I think that both sides are needed, because I think that there is a perspective that women have and there's a perspective that men have, and they each, it's not that they don't have the other perspective, but they each have a stronger leaning that the other side requires.
Totally.
So for example, it's not that women aren't logical or rational. They are, but their emotions are stronger, and so they're approaching something with emotions, and their heart and the feeling is definitely in there. It's leading. It doesn't mean that they're not rational, but they definitely, if they're going to lean a little bit more and they can really be led by their feeling about a thing. And the exact opposite can be said for a guy. It's not that guys aren't emotional or don't have any feeling.
You're right.
But it's that kind of a logical, practical approach may lead more. And that's why I need a woman to kind of help balance that out when it comes to the feeling.
Yeah.
And she needs me when it comes to kind of balancing it out when it comes to the logical. I know that there were times in my own relationship with my own parents, there were some things that I just felt like my mother was saying, or decisions that she made that I just felt like weren't necessarily rational or weren't necessarily all that logical.
Yeah.
But they were coming more from her feelings for me. My mother just was like, "You're not playing football," and that decision just came kind of out of her love for me and her emotions for me and her feelings for me as her child. It wasn't necessarily about the logic of it. And then when I talked to my father about the fact that I had a choice of either soccer or football or cross country, and I had to play a sport in the fall in my school. The school I went to, there was no choice. You had to play a sport.
Yeah.
And so of those three, football was the one that I wanted to play the most. And so I just feel like there's that balance that is required. And I think that, we have to continue to communicate. And what we're trying to do is communicate to the men how much your perspective is required. And how much we need men to continue to step up. And we need every guy that's fathering their children to be in the life of their children.
100%.
I think one of the things that's encouraging to me about millennials, about your generation, a lot of the you guys that I am mentoring, I think a lot of the guys, they're in less of a rush to have kids. I think a lot of guys who grew up without their fathers in their lives, and it's like if they do have kids, they're very, very passionate about their children. They're very, very passionate about being in their children's lives. And so I think the worm is turning. I really do.
It wasn't until I moved here, really, and developed a relationship with you that I wasn't straight paranoid about being a dad.
Right.
Because it's hubris for me to think I can do something that I never saw done. Right? I didn't think I could be a husband because of the home that I grew up in, and certainly seeing it modeled helped to instill a confidence. But I can do that.
Right.
I can do that because I've seen it, and I think we've said this tons of times: more is caught than taught. And if I'm not catching anything, because there are tons of things I thought were healthy. Until I moved out. If you're in a room long enough and it's funky, you don't know it's funky because you've just been in that room for so long. And it's not till you go get some fresh air and you come back, you're like, yo, it stinks in here, It's not until I got older, I'd moved from Boston, I'd moved out of my parents' home, and I kind of got some fresh air. And then I went to visit, and I was like, oh my God, this is dysfunctional, this is that. It wasn't until I started to realize that, oh my gosh, I kind of grew up crappy. It wasn't until that point that I felt confident enough to say, okay, now I can be a dad. I think at least I know the right people to turn to ask some questions. I remember even just being in your house. This is probably 7, 8, 9 months ago. And you and First are sitting there talking about how to discipline kids.
Right.
I mean, you're listing out, okay, you can't hit them while you're angry, you can't do this, you can't, nope, you tell them to sit down, and you're like, it's all these steps to spanking kids. I'm like, that's not what happened to me.
Right,
What are
right.
you, like, there was no Bible verses, no one prayed, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
Like,
right,
so I
right.
didn't even learn how to discipline kids from my own parents
Right,
because
right.
my dad beat me in public, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
Like,
right.
My dad beat me in Sears one time so bad, he almost went to jail.
Right,
you know? So,
right,
like,
right,
it's
exactly.
just, I'm sitting in your house and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's,
And I think another factor in it too is that, you know, and I was talking to someone. No, you and I were talking last night after I was driving home when I called you, and I was kind of saying that crap is entertaining. It's like
Yeah.
that. I mean, that right now reality shows are trying to show crap. They're not necessarily trying to show clay.
Yeah.
They're trying to show drama. You know.
Yeah.
And I think those are the things that we find funny, and even the depiction of family life very often. I don't think we can underestimate the impact of the media. And I don't necessarily think the media has some negative agenda. I don't think the media is trying to destroy the family.
No.
I think the media is just they're just trying to entertain.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like there are things that sometimes the things that we find funny are very dysfunctional, but it can almost reinforce dysfunctional behavior in the life of people. You know, I know that one of my issues just with marriage relationships is that it's almost like if we watch enough sitcoms or look at enough TV, we almost feel like nobody gets along or nobody's happy. Or I was, watching this Chris Rock stand up from years ago, Bring the Pain or something. I don't remember what it was called. And he was kind of saying you're either, single and, lonely, or married and bored, or single and lonely. And he just kind of went on this whole rant just about, how boring marriage is and how lonely single life is.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when entertainers are entertaining, they're entertaining to entertain.
Yeah.
And I don't
Not
necessarily
necessarily to teach.
No, and I don't necessarily know if they're really doing the proper analysis as to kind of what this pebble in the water, what kind of ripples it's going to affect.
Yeah.
And I think the same could be said for, sitcoms. I think for there's a lot of dysfunction. There's a lot that is just, it's entertaining. It's very entertaining for the wife to just be mad all the time, just to be kind of mean. I used to watch Everybody Loves Raymond, and it's almost kind of like, although they're together, they're married, they stay married, but it's almost like Ray is almost like he's almost like a child. He's almost very immature. It's like his mother babied him, and so it's almost like he's still a baby. And so it's almost like Deborah has to be kind of this shrewish, kind of mean person. Because she's babysitting even him. And so I think that, that impact on how men see themselves. I went to see the movie Mom's Night Out or something like that. Girls Night.
I don't know.
No, not the most recent one.
Oh, okay.
This was one from a while ago, maybe a year ago or so, that was starring the girl from that '70s show, Mila Kunis or whatever. She was in it because they're about to come out with one for Christmas.
Oh, cool.
And when I watched it, I just kind of, I'm always bothered by just the way the guys are depicted. It's like her husband was depicted as just, it was like he was like a kid. It was almost like, he's just like a glorified adolescent child. And it's almost like she has to be mom, breadwinner, come home, he's playing video games. It's just the way that men are depicted sometimes in the media, especially within the family role. I don't think that the intention is to tear down family, but I don't think it helps.
You're right. And in moving here, I think one of the things, the real role of a dad is something that I realized, and it's even biblical. It says that the man is the head of the home.
Right.
And what is headship? What does that do? Well, the face or the head brings identity to the rest of the body.
Sure.
That if I pull out my ID and it's a picture of me, that picture is the thing that signifies that this is actually the real person, that the name matches the face. And I think I was counseling a young guy in the youth group, and he was struggling with his gender. And his dad came in, his mom came in, and the dad, the first thing he said was, I kind of asked him, how do you feel? Do you feel more like a dude? Do you feel like more like a girl? And he said, my son didn't really have an answer. And I said, you shouldn't ask him that.
Yeah.
You bring identity to him. You have to tell him who he is.
Yeah.
He's not at the place to decide that at 12 or 13 years old.
Right.
You are at the place to instill into that boy who he is. Hey, I see you as a leader, and you know what? You're compassionate. You're artistic. You're really creative, or you're athletic, and you're good at this. And you're my son. And it wasn't until I think spiritually when I moved here that I started to feel a sense of like identity.
Yeah.
I'd always been a gifted individual. I'd always been a preacher or a pastor. But I remember one time, and it was early on in our relationship and me moving here, you said to me, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And I thought to myself, is this dude telling me he's God in my life now? But here's the thing, and this is, you can tell me if I'm biblically off. And when Samuel first hears the voice of God, he thinks that it's Eli.
Right.
He goes and he says, Eli, what is it? And he goes, no, I didn't say anything to you.
Right.
He said, the next time you hear that, say, speak, Lord, for your servant's listening. That the sound of our earthly father actually sounds like our heavenly father.
Sure.
That when you have a spiritual dad in your life, they do sound like the voice of God in your life. And so I remember, it was months before I realized, no, he does have plans for me. He does have plans to prosper me, not to harm me. And God is using this man in my life to give identity to everything that I've been doing that didn't have any direction, and I didn't know why. I knew that I had gifts, but didn't know where to put them.
Yeah.
And the dad isn't just this goofball, this person that needs to be babysat. Actually, the dad is the one who gives meaning and identity and definition to all the members in the body.
Yeah.
And says that no, these members belong to this head, and we as men, as dads, are supposed to provide that for families.
I think it's an interesting segue kind of into even spiritual leadership or my fellowship, guys I'm mentoring, pastors that are out there. We started this Overcomers Christian Fellowship, and kind of, even in last night after service was over, I took a bunch of these guys out, and we kind of had a conversation about 2018. And one of the things that we talked about was vision.
Yeah.
Because I think that a part of what has happened in the last 50 years is that, in a sense, Christianity, there was a time when Christianity was regulated, really.
Yeah.
That the denominations were the original brand. And so, the vision was a Baptist vision. The vision was a Methodist vision. The vision was a Presbyterian vision. You weren't necessarily out here trying to figure out what your own vision was.
Yeah.
You were selling the Baptist burger. You grew up Kojic, you're selling a Kojic burger.
Yeah.
You grew up AME Zion. You grow up believing, wow, this AME Zion Church, this is the way to go.
Yeah.
This is the burger even if I'm called, this is the kind of burger I want to sell.
Yeah.
I just want to preach at the national convention, and then I want a pulpit given to me that is this Baptist church or this Church of God church or this Episcopalian church, because I was raised Methodist. What were you raised? Well, I was raised Church of God prophecy. Okay. And so in a sense, that is the vision. You're not necessarily being tasked. I think it's very interesting that we find this kind of dichotomy between what's happening in culture and what's happening even in the church. This past weekend, my youngest brother, the seventh child in my family, my youngest brother, Michael, came up here from Orlando to escape, the storms and everything that was happening there. And I took his kids out, and I took his boys out. I took his boys to get a haircut, his two oldest boys. And I started to talk to them about the fact that they're fourth generation Thompsons.
Yeah.
And I said to them, I know that you're Mike and I know that you're Jacob. I know that's your name, but let me tell you who Thompsons are.
Yeah,
And so then
yeah.
I talked to them about my grandfather, their great grandfather, and him, walking to Tuskegee, and him
Yeah.
being educated, and him making money,
Yeah.
and then I talked to them about my father, which is their grandfather, and kind of what he did, and just to kind of to because I think that right now we're kind of in a time in the world where it's almost like everybody is on this individual journey to figure out who they are or
Yeah, yeah.
their self.
Yeah.
And I think that where that just wasn't the case historically
Yeah.
with humanity.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, I'm the son of Jarrell. I'm the son, we were talking about before, it's kind of when General Zod comes to him in Superman, it's like when General Zod gets to America and sees Superman, he doesn't even call him Superman. He calls him son of Jarrell.
Yeah.
Come to me, son of Jarrell.
Yeah.
Kneel before Zod. It's kind of thinking about, I'm this person, son of this person, son of this person. When you're reading the Bible and you look at all that genealogy, they're not doing that it's not like whoever wrote the Bible had to write
Let's make this as boring as possible.
or that they're writing a paper for someone and just trying to fill in as many names as possible. Supposed to write a 1,000-word paper. Let me list every name. Son of Pithiniel, son of Lulamel, The reason why they did that is because a part of the way that your identity is traced is kind of, who am I out of? What's the source of me?
Yeah.
What seed am I from? And I think the same is true when it comes to church and kingdom. It's like there was a time when, no, you're Kojic.
Yeah.
And so now you're bringing your gifts to bear,
Yeah.
but you're bringing your gifts to bear with a vision and an identity that's already set.
Yeah.
And now it's almost the independent church, or the day of the independent church, has thrust, not only has independence thrust every individual on a search for self-identity,
Yeah.
but it has thrust all of these pastors into a world of, okay, well, what is my vision?
Yeah,
And
that's good.
what do who
Yeah.
do I think the church needs to be?
Yeah.
And a part of what my meeting with these guys last night in this restaurant was, let me tell you what I think the vision should be.
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
tell you the vision that I think is important if you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
In really being a good, wide-ranging, cross-cultural, and I don't just mean racial culture, I just mean economic culture.
Yeah, for
How
sure.
are you going to be effective?
Yeah.
You have to be careful not to adopt a vision that's overly about hope or overly about
Yeah.
grace or
Yeah.
overly about whatever. And I think a part of what I kind of did there is kind of what we're talking about a little bit. At some point,
Provide identity.
that father has to say, okay, this is what we are.
Yeah.
I think, guys are coming to me, and certainly our fellowship is growing, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times guys are coming, and it's like they want the recipe. They
Yeah.
want to know how we've been able to be successful,
Yeah.
how we've had this fastest growing church, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying to them, the recipe's nice, but identity is even more important.
Yeah, you're right.
At this
You're
particular
right.
point in time, because I think it's a part of what we're missing.
Yeah.
And I think a part of what we're seeing with Elevation Church and Hillsong's Church and even what the New Birth Church is that people are at Potter's House.
Yeah.
It's like people are recognizing that identity is equally important as recipe.
Yeah, you're
And
right.
I can't just go to ARC with me going to ARC with my own special recipe doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be successful.
Yeah, you're
And
right.
ARC may break down for me, or this particular church planning group may break down for me menu and how to, and give me a lot of great plans.
Yeah.
But that some of what the world is starting to look for is identity.
Yeah, you're right. And I think when you said we're on a search for identity, I think sometimes it's a unnecessary search for identity.
Sure.
That there is a way to find identity, and that's I'm a part of something else that's bigger than me, and
Yeah.
I have found identity as an overcomer, as someone who is a part of World Overcomers, as someone who's a part of this house, and that doesn't mean that I'm not significant.
Right.
I think that takes a lot of security in yourself to go, no, I think anyone who meets me and knows me, it's like, oh, I'm Manny Arango. I really love myself.
Right.
I think I'm awesome.
Right.
Right? But it's
we know this.
I'm
Sure.
great.
Yeah.
I'm pretty great.
Right.
But me saying, no, I'm Manny Arango. I'm Pastor Andy's youth pastor. I'm a spiritual son. I'm a son of this house. I represent World Overcomers. Doesn't make me less.
Right.
Doesn't diminish any of the dreams that I have or aspirations that I have. Actually, it helps me get there faster, and because I don't have to spend all this energy trying to find like this identity. It's actually something that's been provided for me.
Yeah.
And that I think is consistent with everything God had been speaking to me as a teenager and as a young adult. I knew when I heard the voice of Eli that was the voice of God, and they sounded the same.
Yeah.
And I could trust it.
But it's very different, though, because I think that right now I think the thing that's really cool about someone like Steve Furtick, especially to this particular generation, is how it's almost like he's out of nowhere, or you almost can't really trace
You're right,
kind of who he was connected to. And that's not necessarily the norm. And I think that, I'm not being critical of him at all, because he's amazing. He's a phenom, and I'm excited about him. I've met him. He's a great guy. But I'm just saying that typically the way that Kingdom has happened is people want to know who were you connected to.
Yeah.
So when Fred Price first came on the scene, it's kind of like, oh, he's the son of Kenneth Hagin. Or when Creflo Dollar first came on the scene, it was like, oh wow, that's Kenneth Copeland's guy or whatever. And
even Saul, discipled by Gamaliel.
Exactly.
It's like it even goes
people
back.
make that connection between where are you coming out of, and that gives you a certain amount of validation.
Yeah.
And I think that even when someone like Furtick first came on the scene, people were kind of like, oh, I think it was with Ron Carpenter, or they were trying to attribute it to someone because it's just so weird to just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But I think that a part of the challenge with the young generation is everybody wants to be that phenom. Everybody wants to be that person.
And everyone with a Facebook Live
That's right.
or an Instagram
Exactly.
thinks that they have a right to air their opinions.
Exactly.
Which I'm not going to get on my soapbox on your podcast, but
Sure.
that's
right.
I'm sick of seeing Facebook Lives of people giving marriage advice who have been married for 2 years.
Well,
just sit down.
Exactly.
Like, it's okay.
But I think that what's starting to happen in the world is that people are starting to say, yeah, but who quantifies you to say that?
Yeah, you're right.
Who actually empowers you to say that?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a part of of what's happening even with all of the fellowships,
Yeah.
but certainly my fellowship.
Yeah.
A part of what I was talking to the guys about yesterday is that it's difficult if you're the only one going against the wind.
Yeah.
Whereas if there's a group of us that are together trying to
Yeah.
move people towards success, then that's going to be something that's going to make it easier for you to do it.
100%.
And so that it's not just, as much as sure I'm here for you, here to pastor you, here to help you, at the same time, a part of what I may be here to help you do is to help you to identify actually what you should be saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's challenging.
That is challenging.
It may be challenging, especially when everybody thinks they have a burger recipe, because everybody
You're
just
right.
thinks so highly of themselves.
You're right.
That they just think, no, I have a burger recipe that's amazing, or I have my own rap style that's going to change the game.
You're right.
Because everybody's trying to be Jay-Z, everybody's trying to be Drake, instead of people just being like, wow, Drake is kind of come up with this new style of music, so let's all start making music like that and be successful. No, everybody's trying to figure out I got a new thing. And so I think that, it's interesting.
It's
an
very
interesting.
It's very interesting. Can I tell my favorite story of coming to North Carolina?
Sure, go ahead.
My favorite story, here we go. This is like my first Sunday here.
Okay.
I got moved here from Boston, and I packed everything in my Honda Civic because I'm like, man, the Lord had told me 2 years prior that, man, that guy, Andy Thompson, that's supposed to be your dad. And I knew I needed a spiritual father. So I get here, and I'm expecting, like, a hug, you know what I'm saying? I'm expecting, like, welcome, like, I'm expecting, I don't know. I'm definitely expecting, like, open arms. Anyway, PA pulls me in the back after. He's like, where's your phone? I'm like, my phone's right here. My phone's here. He's like, pull up these social media accounts you got. And I'm like, okay. And you're like, yeah, delete that. Delete those. Delete Instagram, delete Twitter, because you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm crushed. I mean, I'm crushed. First off, I'm a 25-year-old grown man. Okay?
Right.
Did this man just take my phone and delete? And then he goes, so I ask, so when can I have? Now I'm 25, and I'm asking, so when am I allowed to? When can I tweet again? When can I post on Instagram again? And you say, I'll let you know. So then I go, okay, why am I not allowed to post? Like, why can't? And then you said again, I'll let you know. So for the next 2 months, I'm social media less. Now I remember we sit down, and somehow you then start showing me everything that I posted that was incorrect, inappropriate, not good for my image, not right. And I think that sometimes we're waiting for dads to tell us the why before we obey. Yeah. And I think it was a test of, can I just trust you? Can I just trust without an explanation? Can I just trust? And I think when we sat down, we were at South Point Mall, and you began to show me everything I had posted that was stupid. And it was stupid.
Right.
It lacked identity. It was not in line with the identity that I think you saw in me. And in that moment, it clicked. Man, this dude's, number one, he's smarter than me. Number one, he's smarter than me. Number two, he's wiser than me. Number three, you know what? Even if I don't understand, I'm just going to listen. Like, I don't have to understand. And I think that a lot of times we are banking on our own ability to understand, to lean on our own understanding. And I was operating in my own understanding, and it wasn't, I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
And it took someone who was a lot older and wiser than me to go, wait, you're a single dude and you had a woman crush Wednesday? And
right.
Of who? Like, why did you do?
Right.
You thought this was okay?
Right.
So I'm there like, I'm 25. I should be able to do what I want. And you're looking at me like, yeah, you're 25. You should be smarter.
Right.
What are you doing?
Right.
Yeah, that's my favorite story.
I mean, I think the truth of the matter, and the behind the scenes of that story is that, in a way you pay it forward, because I was doing to you what was done to me.
Yeah.
I had a very similar situation when I moved to Oklahoma to work for Carlton Pearson.
Yeah.
I waited all this time to get this meeting with him, and I just couldn't wait to share with him. And when I got in his office, he was just kind of like, yeah, sit down, I'll be there in a minute, and I just was kind of like, dude, what the heck, and he did a bunch of other stuff, and then his kids came in and took up a bunch of my time, and then, I really expressed to him kind of where I thought I was at the time, and he basically was like, yeah, you need to stop talking, and you need to not say that, and
yeah,
that's a sign that you're broken,
yeah,
and, you need to be healed,
yeah,
and I don't know if I'd say that, and I actually thought that I was saying some stuff to him that was going to make him feel like how loyal I was to him. And it didn't make him feel good about him. It made him look at me and say, wow, you've got some stuff you need to get together. Because if that's your raison d'etre, if that's the reason why you're doing what you're doing, you've got some growing to do.
Yeah.
And I kind of went home kind of reevaluating. It's higher learning ultimately.
Yeah.
To get involved and to be around someone that thinks on a whole nother plane, that has a whole nother level of faith.
Yeah.
It's hubris, like you said, and it's presumptuous to think, oh, well, I know why he's doing that.
Yeah.
I say on a regular basis, you're not really ready to judge somebody if you don't have the faith like they have and you don't know what they know.
Yeah.
But anyway, dude, we've been talking for, what has it been, almost an hour? 1 hour.
Look at that.
Wow, that was dope. So
I think it's pretty good.
Podcast for real, talking about fatherhood, talking about real world stuff, and my man Manny Arango,
the one and only.
The one and only. Thanks be to God. When he made him, he broke the mold.
He definitely broke it.
And
Thank the Lord.
Same with me too. So good podcast.